This is now my favorite book. The Philosophies. As soon as you get irritated by one of them, you just read about how they got.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Alas, quite a bit of in bed.
Oh. Good for him.
Unfair for something. Which context do you do?
Well, it's not just putting it in. Well, as much as
Okay.
Yeah. How many people need a copy? Don't have a copy, need a copy.
is there a new
Well, I'm going to try and just print out a couple pages so we don't have to do it too many
yeah,
times.
yeah. I don't need a whole copy.
Just
I
about, no, no.
think we only need.
I know, we all need page 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And you need a whole one. How many people need whole copies? 1, 2, 3. That's it? 1, 2, 3,
I think Natalia will need one as well.
4. Anybody else? Oh, yeah. Do you need a whole copy? Do you it's a trick question. Do you need a full copy or just the corrected page copy? Oh, I think that was the first outline. Okay, so 64.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
You look really warm.
yeah, well, I didn't say that. Whatever. That ends up being
It's pretty chilly.
That's really good. This is a good straight line.
You have to look at
Why are you trying to control your right?
sections.
Just sprawl.
Yeah, I didn't get back until year 10, that's why. So,
At least they know
I just missed it when I was like,
I'm casing. I didn't even have a grade. I was just like, I was all mine.
then that was delayed.
So I usually get back at quarter to, well, I got back about 9:30.
Yeah, I know we're going to change the stuff. You get on to
So everybody's just sitting as far back as possible. Where's Dane? Is he here today? You're doing it. Choice swapping. You're Dane today. Okay. While this is just printing out, I just want to make a couple of announcements anyway. I'll turn the lights off and get serious. The first thing is that on the 28th, which is next Tuesday, Mattia Paganelli is going to give a lecture. He's going to be fabulous, and he's doing this partly because he's fabulous, and partly because I'm going to be giving a keynote in Dundee, for which I'm taking the overnight train. I'm very excited about this, actually. But anyway, so that's on Tuesday. So I couldn't get them to change it. Believe me, I tried. But it was a whole MIT crowd, and they were like, "No, we're not changing it." Yeah, that's the first thing. So I'm sorry about that. So I'll miss you. I'll be here on the Wednesday. But give Mattia a really hard time. That's not playing, is it? Love Mattia. He's great. Anyway, he's fantastic. You will love him. Okay, so the second thing is that this Thursday in London, so I can't do it already, that's a bit an issue, a very good buddy of mine, which is not why you should see him, but a really interesting artist is speaking, named Atau Tanaka, A-T-A-U, Tanaka, T-A-N-A-K-A. He's a sort of musician, computer science-free mad person, media, Viscom's type of character. He'd probably be rolling around hearing me explain like this. He's talking, he's giving his professorial inaugural lecture at Goldsmiths, which is at 5:30. I have 3 tickets, although I could probably get more if you're actually going. I got them for me and friends, but I can't go, and therefore they're not going. But if you're interested in going, then let me know, because it'll be worth your time. So that's the other thing. Yes, you might have to be forced to sit in front. Sorry. With your yes, all right. So there's that. So he's speaking in London. He's speaking on Thursday, and if you want a ticket for it, then please see me in the class or just email me. I can just email it to you so you have it. Any questions on that? That's for those of you that came in late. Tao Tanaka speaking on Thursday, 5:30 in London. Worth going to see. Need a ticket? I have tickets. I have 3 tickets. Okay, I don't have a lot of tickets, but I have them. Okay. For those of you that need a course outline, I'm just doing that right now. Obviously, I've ran out of white paper, so sorry. Now, the other thing is that on the 5th of February, I like a calendar here. On the 5th of February, Lucy Hawkins is going to be speaking at the Imaginarium. And is that, Grace, is that when they're also doing the lightning talks as well?
Yes, the first.
Can you say a little bit about this?
Yeah, it's a wider project of the Festival of Imagination happening at Selfridges around the country. So Birmingham one launches on the 4th of Feb. And I've curated a series of lightning talks, which is certain people from CFAR who are talking about their research or their art practice. So Sophie's one of them, Mark's another. And they're just very
For your
brief,
sins.
Pecha Kucha style talks, so it's 20 slides, 20 seconds, and so it just gives you a brief insight into what is happening at CFAR, as well as obviously people's research. But
Andrea, are you doing it?
Oh yeah, Andrea. Sorry, I left you.
I was going to guilt trip her later.
He's had enough of lightning talks for today. But
Does that mean you are doing it or you're not doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
He is, yes.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a wider programme, so Lucy Hawkins is the lead person, and then there's lots of events that are happening that you can book free of charge for most of them. And you're doing a seminar as well.
Well, we're all doing the seminar.
Oh, seminar, okay.
That's right. Yeah, that's, well, then, just to be very clear, the festival is called the Imaginarium, and the festival, it's with Selfridges and CFAR in this area, in the Birmingham area, but it's being rolled out across the country. Selfridges and some university or art moment. And anyway, and Beth Derbyshire is the sort of brains behind this. And what she's done, which is very interesting, is she's created a whole series of discussions around, this will come as a great shock, alchemy, magic. I don't know why, we were just influenced on this playing field now. So the first person, there's going to be 3 weeks of this going on, and the first week is kicked off with Lucy Hawkins, and she's the daughter of Stephen Hawkins. So, but that's probably she must be ruling it. Yes, I am the daughter of Stephen Hawkins, but actually she's a physicist in her own right, and a very interesting one at that. So I think that it's clearly worth your time if you can get over there for it. Who else needs one of these? A full one, yeah, okay. Sorry that they're on green, I hope you can read it. You need one too, right, Grace? And you need one, yeah, that's what I thought for. Oh, and you need one? Yeah. 5, do you need one? No. Okay, so that's on the 5th. And what time is her opening address?
It starts at
5:30, and then the following week, is that going to be Christina Anderson?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but the full programme's online now, and I can send the link around.
Can you send the link around? That'd be great.
Is the programme online?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you should have got. Did you not get the email with it on?
I didn't get the
It's
email.
on, if you just Google the festival, it's on somewhere. You just have to scroll down a bit.
No, I didn't get an email though.
No, it's not on it. I haven't seen it in an email.
Okay, so,
Do you know when the films have been shown?
The whole programme's up now. So
Oh, right, okay.
yeah.
Because I've got a film showing as well.
You got what?
Film.
Okay, great. And then the following week, or one of the 2 following weeks, is a person named Christina Anderson, who is amazing. And she's the associate, or she's the deputy director at STIME, which is the Studio for Electronic Instrumental Music in Amsterdam. She's an interesting artist. She does a lot of, I guess you might call them sculptures, but I'm not sure what to call them really when you see her. She also works in magic and alchemy and whatnot. And she's probably going, I cannot believe you're introducing me like this. But anyway, hi Christina. She's wonderful. And I don't know who the third person was that they got in. You don't either. Okay. I think it's the 20th of February, which is a Wednesday. I think it's a Wednesday. Anyway, I hope it's a Wednesday.
Christina is the first.
No, you're right. It's a Thursday.
Yeah, 'cause
Christina's the
like,
30th.
that's on the Thursday.
Well, in one of those weeks, we're going to do a seminar.
That's the 13th.
That's the 13th.
And that's a Wednesday. Yeah,
And that's a Wednesday.
That's a Thursday.
That's a Thursday. Oh my God. So we're doing it on a Thursday, are we?
Yeah.
What time?
4:30?
4:30. Okay. Anybody who would like to be in this seminar?
We're doing a seminar at Salford.
Well, not really at Selfridges. We're going to do a kind of mad, it's going to be one of our seminars, right? Okay, so let's make it very odd. It's going to be, we're going to introduce people to philosophy and art and the wild sciences. I'll think about a hook. You can think about a hook as well. And we could in fact do one of our Untimely Meds. In fact, we could do it again, the Untimely Meds thing, if you want. Like the one that you're doing with Mattia, we can do one of them again twice. So you have rehearsed, as it were. So that could work. But anyway, and I'm also inviting the PhD students in as well to that. Yes.
Can I nominate the time for that day?
Sure, if you really want to freak them out. Yeah, why not? Which one?
Don't know.
Just Bataille.
The whole thing.
All of Bataille,
Yeah.
yeah, just Bataille. No, you have to be a little tiny bit more specific, but yeah, we can definitely do that. The other thing is on the 19th of February, it's a very busy month, February actually. I am doing my inaugural lecture. I think it's the 19th, and that is a Wednesday. And I will be being inaugurated, every time you, I was given the I'm so tired. The professorship in philosophy and fine art at this institution, but I was given a professorship many, many years ago. And I thought that it's kind of like being in the military. You know, once you get a title, you just take it with you. But apparently, you have to be reconferred everywhere you go. So I've been reconfirmed as at the level of professor. You'll be happy to know here. And in order to prove that you are at that worthy level, then you get to. I think we might have run out of paper. Oh, no. And we needed one more, right? Here, pass it on. Grace. Sorry. Sorry about this, guys. I thought I had this done. And then everyone needs a new page, right? Needs that new page that I had screwed up on.
Page 2.
Yeah.
March 5.
It's page 5. Did you say page 2? Did someone say page 2?
Yeah.
Uh-huh, great.
Why is it
Don't listen
5?
down.
Oh, there's loads of stuff before the first week, yeah, sorry. The second, sorry. The reading lessons before that, yeah.
There's about how many years? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 20. And I haven't set up the your emails yet. So when I do, I'll send you a full copy of this so you'll be able to see it properly. Okay, any questions so far? No. What? What's that?
So what are we doing?
That reminds me, last point. Apparently, for those of you that are recent graduates, or will be recent graduates of this program, or any program apparently associated with BIAD. There are placements, paid placements for you. So if you're gonna graduate at the end of June, or whenever it is, end of May, you know, somewhere, if you're graduating soon, then you're eligible for a paid placement. Now, if you want more information about this thing, because I know nothing about it other than the fact that I was asked to say something, I've now said something, write to me, say more information on the paid placement. Okay.
Sue was emailed about it.
Did she?
Yeah, I think so, and we have to learn that he's under 25, so.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's the other catch, under 25, which I think is ridiculous. I think you can make an argument. As I've already said, I don't do age. I don't think, and in fact, I thought it was illegal to do this. But anyway, that's right. That was the thing. Yeah, I think anybody that's not 25 in biological terms, I think you could make an application. Get it to say. Go to the press. Could be worse. Okay. Yeah, because I absolutely think that's outrageous. Okay, so that's pretty good. There you go. Okay, sorry, we're almost ready to start. Oops. Did you have a question?
No, I was going to say.
What?
It's a bit like Turner Prize.
Oh, why? What's the Turner Prize?
That's
You have to be a bad artist?
No, you
Yeah.
have to be my favourite things.
You have to be over 50? Huh. Wow. But why? You know, why? What are these dates, you know? Dates of life. You know, it's like ridiculous, especially in this time period where, you know, you can't even get started until you're 100. Okay, now, I just want you to listen, because you're gonna get this in your hand in a moment. Now I'm printing out. Oh, I cannot believe this. I'm printing out the wrong one. That's unreal.
Page 2, is it?
Okay, hold on, let's just stop that one. That was my line.
Yes, and it's your fault.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it is Mark's fault.
We can blame her.
Yes, I think it's very important. Okay, now, let me write one. Unbelievable. Don't yawn.
Oh, sorry.
Back to you, if you need anything, we'll wait for this. Okay. Yeah, don't think I don't have eyes in the back of my head. I do. I know exactly what it is. Right. Okay. Right, it is page 5. This is that part, this is right. Ah, sorry. In the section that we will get to whenever it decides to print itself out, which was next week's reading, or no, yes, next week's reading is on Foucault and Nietzsche. And it's what I'm asking you to do in that one is to, which you'll be doing with Mattia, is to think about the relation between a thing called archaeology, discourse, and genealogy. And we'll start with the Nietzschean genealogy, go to archaeology, and then end up on discourse. But, why is this not printing?
It's got a message.
This printer's been paused. Oh no, I don't know what's happening. Sorry. So many issues. with this bloody thing. I hope that we get this printer today. I'm so apologetic here. Okay. I think we have to turn the lights off and just begin. You're gonna get the page. We're taking too much time, it's annoying me. Could you turn the light on? Nick? Thanks. Yeah, and we have to have the other lights on, so the one where you are. There. Okay. Today, what I wanted to go into was. Nice to see you. Okay, we're just literally trying to get started here, so. In fact, while this is printing, maybe if you just go around very quickly, because Fiona doesn't know everybody, or if you do, well done. Bad. That's right. Did it break? No. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. If you don't mind going around, I'm sorry, this is a bit chaotic at the moment. I don't like that. If you don't mind going around saying who you are and whatever name you want to go by, that's fine. And then we'll just go around quickly so that people can just remember everybody's name, and then we'll start again.
Just name.
Name, why you're here, or what you want someone to know about you.
I'm Annika. I'm doing history of art and design, curator, writer, administrator.
That's great. Memorizes.
Great.
Very good. Very good.
I'm Natalia, and I'm very soon going to start my PhD, but because it's philosophy here, for me starting here, so I'm here as well.
Okay. Good. And what are you doing then? What's the topic?
The topic I'm researching in field of fashion design, the relationship between clothes and body, and how they create a system, complex system of interaction. And there are connections between Japanese design, unseen and silence.
Good. Very good. And Ikebana.
Yes.
I was
Yeah,
shocked that you didn't
Japanese, I mean
mention
Ikebana,
that.
not Japanese
Major-
design, but for me
major-
Ikebana.
Okay. Very good.
Complexity between fashion and body. Okay.
Okay, now it's gone mad and it's just printing out pages. I don't understand this. Okay, fine, perfect. It's now 19 pages long. God. Anyway, sorry. Okay,
I'm Andre. I'm really met with Johnny first year, 2 years. That's it.
Okay. Johnny.
no, that's on
Andre.
contract.
Andre.
With Johnny.
Andre with Johnny.
I'm Natalia, one.
Natalia B.
And another Natalia. I'm doing Masters Fine Art part-time. This is my first year.
Okay.
And you're a
Natalia
painter?
A, PhD, Natalia B, Masters. Okay.
And then supposedly a painter.
You don't really have to repeat this, it's really.
But it's something in my head.
No, no, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Hello.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm on the Fine Art Masters part-time one, and I do sculpture.
Hello, Katie.
I'm Joanne. I'm doing Fine Art Masters part-time, and I'm a painter.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark, media arts philosophy, practice, sound designer. That's very briefly.
It's very good.
George, producer and musician.
Okay.
I'm Simon, I'm on fine arts and I'm a painter.
Okay.
Where are you doing your,
Rarity.
sorry, where are you doing your placement?
Right.
Hello. Oh yeah, great. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh.
I should remember you.
I'm Nick, third year BA student, what's what, aspirant, MA.
Good.
I'm Samantha, I'm a third year BA.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Charlotte. I'm in MA Studies, and I practice photography.
Hello.
I'm Millie. I'm doing fine art full time and I do sculpture.
I'm Andrew, I'm looking at an iconic graphic.
Okay.
Emma doing the arts practice and education MA and sculpture.
Okay.
Claire doing masters full-time fine art.
Okay, nice to meet you.
I would do art and project management.
Okay.
And
I'm Yasmin. I'm doing full-time and fine art at all. I'm Sophie. I'm doing media arts philosophy practice full-time. I do mixed media work with film, light, colour, and feminist studies.
And Arch, queer studies.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, queer.
Hello, Theon, just the same as well, continuing student on the Queer Studies program, and I'm looking at, well, this is where I'm going now, linking BDSM with performance art.
But then that, just explain what that is.
Oh, sorry,
They don't-
bondage, discipline, sadomasochism with performance art. What does that mean? That's where I'll leave it for now.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Let's take a breath and see if we can actually get the show on the road. I do apologize again for the 90th time because of this insane printout, but and it just keeps having to print out things, so I'm sorry about this. I'm just hoping that I can at least, yeah, okay. Yeah, and I'll probably be able to give you this at least. Okay, today what I wanted to, you know that every time we have the meeting, the course outline, the seminar is what we're doing. So you've had a chance to look at it. And you know that today we're working on fluxus, that we've taken fluxus and we're moving it into questions concerning technology. Yes, yes, well done.
Week 2, right?
Yes, well done.
Yeah, we
Yes,
saying fluxus. I thought that was
that was week 1. Yes, I'm drawing it across.
Okay.
Don't worry. Okay, what I wanted to do today was give you the sort of the basis of what this course is going to do, how it's going to open up, and that's why we're focusing on the rhizome and on the question concerning technology. So hopefully you've got this general sense of the course, and you know that we're going to move fairly quickly. And we started with the fluxus in order to break apart rigid notions of how one understands what is the is in front of us. What is this is? So that will become more obvious, the way in which, the reasons why we're dealing with this and talking like that, talking like the grammar is very odd. Okay, so just bear with me. You know that in fluxus, the argument was that it was a happening. This is such an old thing. In fact, the word happening and fluxus was on the board when we had a meeting last week, and one of the, John Wigley, as a matter of fact, said, how old is this class that's been going on? I said, yes, a long time. Fluxus was partly anti-establishment, which I want to put it this way, since partly because we had these fantastic seminars today, these amazing, the students, the artists that presented were excellent, all of them. And one of the students, Francis, was talking about sex, drugs, rock and roll, basically, as a way of talking about counterculture. And in the 60s, there was a thing called counterculture, with the view that there was this thing called culture, and that one went counter to it if you wanted to be interesting, if you wanted to change the world. Now that notion of counter the culture, countercultural, is based on a dialectical understanding of logic. If this, go that way. Otherwise, on the other side of the this is the not this. There's the culture, then on the other side is the counterculture. The thesis, the antithesis. And it seemed like a real strategy. Now, that it didn't work is due to many reasons. The one reason it's not due to is because of the logic. Never think that something doesn't work. Sorry about all these double negatives. Or put it slightly differently, things don't work just because someone has thought it wrong. things don't work because of power, because of place, because of the way you get caught up in a system. And this is what Foucault's contribution, he lays down the gauntlet and basically says, you know, the counterculture thing is all very interesting. You really want to go counter the culture? Then it's not going to be an opposite. There's no opposite. There's no sense of resistance at the level of going in the other direction. Sometimes resistance requires you to go in the same direction. And you gotta know when those times are. And you gotta know how those times operate. So the notion of counterculture, which is based on a wider sense of the social whole, society as a whole, the notion of totality that we went on about forever last semester, this notion of the totality, is going to be blown apart. And in its place is a different way of thinking. Now I'm going to use the word logic, even though I don't mean by that a rational sitting down, working it all through, and then realizing, oh yes, that's where we're going. It's a logic that means you can make either a projection, you can say, if this, then that, but sometimes the if-then position, if-then, in order to make a causal link, if something, then something else, that follows a very specific kind of science, a very specific kind of mathematics, a very specific kind of logic. One could easily call it Newtonian physics or Euclidean geometry. If there's a cause, then there's a reaction. And you can follow the trail. So you can find out little pieces and you can follow a trail. Now, this is not to suggest that that never works, because it does work. Anybody who's a detective would know this. Anybody who's been watching Breaking Bad would know this. Okay, I finally finished, so I'm okay now. I can now be a person. I mean, anyway, sorry, addiction was real. Okay, you know, now the problem is, or the way to come at this slightly differently is that there's an argument that's being thrown out that we are living in a time period right now that is wildly different than before. Now, you know, lift a rock, find people who say that the time period we're living in is wildly different than before. So the question is, really, is it different? And if it is different, in what way is it different? And different from what? And so on and so forth. So the first part of our answer to that question is yes, it is different. It is wildly different, is the next part of that question. Now, that is not to say that this type of life has never been lived before. It's to say it's never been lived this way. What is this way? The argument that is being put on the table in this class is that we are in a time period of technology, and that matters. It might sound self-evident, but the fact of the matter, which is going to be argued, is that the world that we have now stepped into, either knowingly or unknowingly, has radically shifted. And no longer, for better or for worse, can one make those kind of notions of, let's say, resistance based on an either-or paradigm. You might want to go against something, but you might just get swallowed up in it. Now, as I started at the outset to say that sex, drugs, rock and roll, there are a lot of people that say, well, you know, the hippies, the hippie movement, they got bought out. I have read so many time periods where people will say, well, you know, the hippies. Now, Nick, you were around in the hippie moment. Were you a hippie?
Not quite.
Not quite, but you were.
Just a bit after that, I was a sort of meditator and that sort of.
Yeah, but so hippie. But you were counterculture in that sense. You weren't like necessarily taking the drugs.
No, I was a medical student, so I was very.
So you were taking the drugs. No. So the reason I mention it this way is because in the when the Vietnam War happened in Vietnam, obviously, but the protests were happening in the States and in North America and then all over the world, really, Europe at least. And then that turned into this thing called the famous student revolutions that a lot of you haven't even been born during the time that people bang on about 68. So, you know, I used to just cringe every time, you know, my professors would say, and then in 1968, you're like, whatever, you know, like, you know, most people were like 3 or 0 or nothing, you know. Anyway. But it is interesting that in 1968, all around the world, that year had a resonance. And that's kind of interesting that that's the case. What was the resonance that was going on? You know, in Oxford and in Cambridge, you had students taking over, they were sitting, you know, and not just in Oxbridge. I do find it, as a parenthetical remark, amazing, close parenthesis, that the students of today did not think to take over all the institutions until they repealed the idiotic position of making you pay, on the grounds that they wanted to be more like America. That is scary. I say this as an American. You must agree. The idea of fundamentalism and the idiocy that is like apparent in so many quarters of the U.S. Yes, it's a lot of fun and there's a lot of wonderful things, and go to New York. But I have to say that when you take education away from the people, that's what you get. So you got to be careful what you wish for. So, but the real question is, how come there wasn't a huge reaction? Well, there was a reaction. I mean, people were kettling. I was kettling, and like we got kettled in this like mad thing. Somebody died, you know. Like it was just, it's not like nothing happened. But why didn't it count? Why didn't it matter? How come when the people, and a lot of people took to the streets with their kids and the parents and the students, and it didn't matter? How come it didn't work? Whereas in 1968, it did seem to matter. So that's the first question that needs answering. How come sometimes when you have 1 million people marching, it's as though you're just yawning, and on another time when one person is shot, World War I breaks out? How come? So Foucault has an answer to that question. And he says it's because you need to understand how things are set together as a discourse. Just write the word down for the time being. We'll come back to it many, many times. D-I-S-C-O-U-R-S-E. Maybe he knows. Oh, sorry. Discourse. And I circle back again. What happened to these hippies? What happened to the students that were revolting? I mean, you know, organizing. What happened to the 4 who were shot in Ohio, as the song goes? What happened to all that? Well, depending on who you read and what myths and studies you look at, you'll say, oh, they became lawyers, or they were bought out. And that's true in part. But they were also murdered. They were also killed in some way or another. Some of them got so depressed that they couldn't see their way forward. Some people dropped out, not for good reasons. And that whole thing was very, let's say, it was very interesting, use a kind of non-committal word, because it meant that if you really are going to go counterculture, if you really are going to, like, you know, buck the system, A, you got to remember there is actually a system, and it will not be happy when you buck the system, and there will be a reaction. So, for example, if you realize that racism is in fact very problematic, and you go up to a racist and you say, you know, really, you're being racist, and the guy or the woman, the child goes, oh, of course, didn't realize, thank you, I feel much better now, I've pointed it out. No, that's not what happens. People don't give up power very easily, and they certainly don't give up power when you point it out to them that they're being jerks. Okay, that's probably the last time that they'll give up power. And so Foucault was asking the question, how do you resist that? How do you resist horrible things? And he says in his preface to the Anti-Oedipus, one does not have to be sad to be a militant, even though the things we are fighting are abominable. It's always a good thing to remember. You have to be serious, but if you're so serious, you're not gonna survive it. There's no net when you go out on that particular tight walk. You wanna be interesting artist? You wanna like buck the system, you wanna do something unique? Good luck. Be prepared. By that I mean, be prepared that if you fall off the little, thin little net thing that you're on, that you have something underneath to catch you. And the question is, what's that gonna be? Is that gonna be your community? Is that gonna be your parents? You're gonna have to go home to them? What happens if you don't have parents anymore? What's it gonna be? What happens if you are a parent? So where are you gonna go? To your child? It's a problem. So just be careful. That's the first thing. But one way to be careful is not to do anything, but to understand how the system works. Well, how does the system work? So Heidegger, our wonderful Heidegger, Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger is an interesting character, and I bring him into this part of the story so that we widen the palette so you get a sense of what's going on. Heidegger, Heideggger, Heidegger. I abbreviated him as Heidi, because for the longest time I could not read Heidegger, because he had been a member, well, his wife was a member of the Nazi Party, which was annoying, which was bad enough. He claimed that he wasn't a member. Well, actually, he didn't claim he wasn't a member. He just never claimed he was a member. Anyway, it was all very complicated. So for a very long time, I refused to read Heidegger on the grounds that he was a Nazi, and I didn't care if I had to reinvent the system. I wasn't going to read him, but okay, I got over that. Just be careful who you read, and be careful who you steal from. It's the old, what I call the Trojan horse problem. You find something really interesting, you go, I think I'll have that, and you bring it to yourself, and you go, yeah, wow, it's great. And it goes, suddenly you have this goop on your face. Okay, it's the same problem. You steal from Heidegger? You want to steal from Heidegger? Yeah. You want to steal from Marx? Great. You want to steal from, Mandelbrot and the mathematicians great. Just remember, they're going to bring a whole thing with them. So just be careful what you steal. So now you got to be careful of the tightrope. You got to be careful what you steal. This does not mean that you should not do stealing or walking on tightropes. You're artists. You're compelled to do this. Something in your DNA at the moment. Okay, so Heidegger makes a very interesting claim. In his book called Question Concerning Technology, which is, please show the book. There it is. Thank you, Mark. And other essays, yes, thank you. And the introduction by William Lovett is the one you should read, because William Lovett actually does a very interesting sort of breakdown of Heidegger. And it's, I think it's useful because Heidegger is like walking through treacle uphill. He can be so thick that you have to kind of let it swim over you. Pretend you're in a Sunday pancakes and French toast moment and you're having syrup poured on your face or your pancakes or whatever, and you're just going with it, and you're not thinking to yourself, wow, I'm gonna gain 500 pounds, or I shouldn't have this, or whatever. Just go with it. Just go with it and wear it with all the goop until at some point you'll realize how to walk with it. That point will happen in about 3 or 4 weeks, minimally, maybe longer, but just. So Heidegger says, in the Question Concerning Technology, in that essay, he wants to say, the world we're in is a different world. And the world we're in is a different world than its immediate, let's say, predecessor, so the industrial world. Of course, it's not like stages. It's not like, Act 1, Scene 2, industrialism. Act 2, Scene 3, technology. They're happening sort of at the same time, but one's giving way to the other. So it's this enmeshing kind of thing going on. Now, do you remember what I said about the word ology? Do you remember what it means? Logic of. It's the logic of something. So it's the logic of Techne. And what he's saying is that we've entered a world where the Techne is what is producing reality. That's kind of interesting. So the underlying comment is that the age called age of technology is not about, this is his famous line, I mean, I used to, in another life when I was at Greenwich, I had a colleague who you'll meet, so I'm going to come here and speak, Steve Kennedy, and we would always use that one sentence, technology is not, you know, the age of technology is not anything to do with technology, and it's just drove me nuts actually, because, you know, yes and no. It is about a little bit about technology. I mean, it kind of does matter when you have certain types of things, and I'll get into that. Like Heidegger gets into the atom bomb and the dropping of the bomb. That technology mattered. Now, he develops the argument very specifically, but I'm going to explain to you why it doesn't matter in the way he's suggesting, so that you can hear the difference, I hope. So he makes the argument that the Techne, T-E-C-H-N-E, bar over the N, so good luck trying to find that character on your keyboard. And if you find it, could you send it around on a Word document so I can paste it, because I what?
Alt and several times on E it will come up.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you can get accents quite a lot there,
Oh, well done. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, all right, so Alt, E, press, Techne. Now what Techne means, literally, and I know as artists you've come across this at least once in your life, I hope. Has anybody come across this? I assume that you've come across this, nobody's come across this, hilarious. Okay, one person has come across it. Okay, well, 2 people, 3 people. That's it? Techne, the word Techne.
Well, we heard it last week, so.
Okay, Techne, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Techne, as you know, since you did hear it last week, but as you might know also in a wider sense, it literally means the skill in grasping something. So it has to do with having a skill. So it's not just I decide to grab this stapler and run with it. You decide, okay, we've got 3 things I'm going to grasp. What do I need to grasp? If I grasp my glasses, I know that I will probably be able to see for a little bit longer than normal. If I grasp this piece of paper, this will yield me certain advantages, but without my glasses, maybe not a whole lot, and certainly without a pen. The stapler, likewise. So probably I might grasp this. Now that's one form of knowledge linked to grasping. I make a calculation, I think, yeah, that I'm going to go with that. This is not the kind of Techne he's talking about. He's saying that there is an art to how that hand comes out and how it takes what you've already thought about in your calculation. Did you hear that? So the first type of grasping is mine. I take it, I run. Okay, that's one kind of grasp. The grasping and you think about the grasping because you think, yeah, I could really do with those extra pair of shoes. You know, just sort of figure out how I can take it. In my day, if you didn't shoplift at least once a month, something was the matter with you. It didn't have to be anything, you know, profound. It could be like a can of tuna, you know, or, you know, like I was very good at books till they've invented, how you get stopped, and it's always problematic. But at the time, I mean, I was such a broke student, this is my logical argument, that I was really good at getting an entire library of philosophy books, because they were wildly expensive and I just couldn't afford them. But I came up with the whole thing. That's grasping with a logic. But the fact that I was not ever caught, that was an art. Okay?
Did you do it with an ethics? Because I'd do it with, I'd steal it, but only if the author was dead.
Only if the author was dead?
Yeah, so what, he's not going to get any money out of it, so I'll take that.
Wow. Okay, well, I was doing contemporary work, so sadly some of them were still alive. I didn't think about that level of the ethics. No, I wouldn't steal it if there's only one copy. And I never stole from a library. Those were my conditions.
Isn't that then the phenomenology of that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, just
Yes.
making sure.
Yeah, you want to elaborate that?
The phenomenology of how something is done is the study of exactly what's going on, not just with like muscle movement, but with muscle memory and the way that things interact with the body and the way that bodies interact with the worlds around them, and looking at like the phenomenology of a hug is something really interesting, depending on if you've been breastfed or not. If you've been breastfed, you have receptors that are activated up here that when people grasp you, these get activated the same way they do when you're a baby and you have a breast sitting on you, or that you're sitting on a breast. So hugs for people who've been breastfed have a phenomenological difference than people who haven't been breastfed because of the ways that their bodies interact with those hugs. So.
Okay, that is absolutely not what I was thinking you were going to say. Okay. However, it was very interesting. Okay, no, the phenomenology I was talking about was that which is based between nomina and phenomena. So that which exists as a wider point of how the logic of the everyday starts getting established. But you're right. I mean, you can push that into this whole question of the brain.
That's performance phenomenology.
Okay.
Feminist ethics for you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. I'm talking about like a different form of phenomena, the form that we're going to use here, which is basically a philosophy type. But I'll get into. Let's leave the word phenomenology breathing in the corner here for a second. Just to come back to what it is to have an art of doing something. So there's a technique you can learn to anything, including, let's say, the technique of hugging or breastfeeding or whatever. There's a technique, but to do it well, or to do it in a way that makes something else happen, this is an art. So when Heidegger is talking about Techne and the logic of Techne, he's saying that there's an art to the logic of the technique if it's going to be done well. That's the first step. And that's not all. He then is really saying, or he pushes this a little bit further to say, that this art, this Techne, what's peculiar about this time period is that it is driven, the logic of the way in which we operate in the world is driven by that fact, the technique, the art of the technique. Not all time periods have been driven this way. Some have been driven mainly by, I don't know, let's say an economic rigidity. Some have been driven by a form of, let's say, slavery, where the everyday, the logic of the everyday didn't require this nuanced form of grasping. It was much more hard, much more either or. So that if you didn't against a counterculture thing, it was against a given body, and the resistance would operate very specifically. But in the age of technology, in the age of the technique, in the age of the art of the technique, a different set of variables get established as what create the borders for how one behaves, or how one thinks, or how one goes forward. This art of the technique has another name, and that name is poesis.
Bringing forth.
Bringing forth. Do you want to read that section?
I can do.
Yeah. So while he's looking for the section, the poesis, P-O-I-E-S-I-S, poesis. Notice it sounds a lot like poetry. Okay, poesis. Poesis is another one of those great words that means kind of everything and nothing at the same time. But it's also very specific in its everything and nothing. So the poesis is a form of a technique that has in it rhythm and a lyricism. If you were thinking about a poem, if you were thinking about how literally a haiku or some sort of poem would operate, you would be able to call it a poem or a sonnet or something if you understood how the pattern operated. It would give you a certain criteria around which to understand it. But for Heidegger, the way he's using this word poiesis is that there is a pattern of resonance like sound, a lyricism that is invested in that skill of grasping. It's something that, if it works, it does something to the mix. It's not just that I take my glasses. Something else happens. And that something else is, as Mark said, stealing the thunder, is the bringing forth. It's what he calls bringing forth. Now Heidegger's going to start talking like this, and you're going to end up talking like this for a little bit. You're going to sound like you were, woe betide, and something like in the 9th century or something, but it's the bringing forth. Now, like I said before, in so many of our classes, the great thing about philosophy is everything becomes a noun. So, the bringing forth. Okay, this thing called bringing forth is not like taking something and putting it forward. It is the thing called bringing forth. The bringing forth. So, a longer way of saying that is the technique, the art of figuring out how to grasp, making it do something, and then it has this energy. That whole line, that's the bringing forth. If your artwork is working, it has in it the bringing forth. If it doesn't, it's illustrative. It just illustrates. It just does the grasp. It needs to bring forth. In the age of technology, Heidegger's arguing that the bringing forth organizes the social. And once you understand that, you understand how to fight. You understand resistance. If you're going to resist thinking that the organizing features of the social are primarily either or in an age of technology, then you're not going to win. Now, the age of technology comes and goes. Because in a military dictatorship, for example, in an environment where you have, where there's no rule of law, you can easily not have the age of technology. So this is why it's important to understand that that the age of technology is not anything to do with the technical per se, the computer, the iPhone, the photograph. But, and here's the caveat, it is those things that help cement it. Because something weird happened, particularly when the computers became more prevalent. So from like the 50s onwards, or it might be more like the 40s onward, 1940s onward, something happened. And it's just now that they're trying to figure out how to make that something that happened stop happening, and they're maybe succeeding, I don't know. The big fight between Tim Berners-Lee. Have you heard of Tim Berners-Lee? Tim Berners, B-E-R-N-E-R-S, Lee. Tim Berners-Lee is the inventor of the web, the World Wide Web. He's an interesting character. I like him. I've met him, we've chatted, he's fabulous. I mean, he's wonderful, actually. He was in despair about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe slightly more than that now, about 7 years ago, because suddenly the web started to shift out of being the World Wide Web and into being something run by apps, what you might want to call applications, or the internet. Now, the internet and the web are not the same thing. So Tim Berners-Lee went on a plea, went on practically a pilgrimage to try and get people to stop with the apps. Because the apps were gonna build silos of knowledge. They were gonna follow what is called corporatism, a very corporatist notion, where we're literally big environments, Google, whatever it happens to be, Apple, they create these silos down and they hold onto power very differently than the web, which the web was able to proliferate knowledge chains. Apps don't do that. Apps don't proliferate knowledge chains. So for Berners-Lee, which we'll get into later, his notion of what was happening with the web, different than the internet. So in case you didn't realize that, the web and the internet are different things. Mark, you knew this. Yes.
But what he's talking about, though, are apps that are run by corporations, whereas
Yeah.
but what Heidegger talks about, and I think it's true, is that when you give the power back to the people, and people start producing apps, people start understanding and using the technology, then there's a power shift. When people can start interacting and using the apps themselves, which is happening more and more, it's happening very much with the young. Then
Well, all I can say at the moment is that, I mean, when one thinks about, you know, what's his name, who's now in Russia, Snowden.
Yeah.
Snowden did everybody a favor on one level by saying, by the way, do you notice that everything is being collected as metadata? And the ability to do that is not the web, it's an app. It's the app scenario, the way in which that ends up collecting and organizing the data. And while it's true, because I don't want to suggest that there's no way to defeat this, I think that there is. There's always a way to defeat it, as long as you're alive. Even then, there might be still another way. But anyway, the point is that these apps operate differently, and one might, it's conceivable, maybe it's not happening, but it's conceivable that what is happening is that the age of technology is over with. And that what we're moving into is the age of corporatism again. But I'll circle back to this. The main thing to get from this point is what Heidegger's talking about is what does it mean when a time period presents itself, when a social moment presents itself as the way one engages in it is via Techne. That is interesting. And that's what he's getting at. And so he goes on and on about how, please don't think of this simply as, or even at all as, technology as such. It's the question becomes, what is it that makes it possible to deal or change or be in the society a certain way that gives you some sort of power. And that's the age of technology, that each individual or each social being, as it were, has some relationship to being able to engage, has some ability to do the Techne. Now, Richard, you're going forth moment. Go forth, young man.
From which point, when he first talked about previous, or the bit where he kind of, the really complex bit?
No, the first bit. Yes, the really complex bit, so that people can understand.
The one where, yes.
What page? Can you cite the page?
It's from page 10.
Does everybody have this to look at?
Just past the bit where he talks about occasion. Yeah.
What's that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Introduction.
Okay. It's on the books, right? The PDFs.
It's the same book.
Yeah. No, it's on. Yes, it's the book. Yeah.
So page 10.
Yeah. Go on.
So the bit where he talks about Plato,
Yeah.
Plato tells us what this bringing is in a sentence from the Symposium. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that.
Every occasion for whatever passes over and goes forward into presencing from that which is not presencing is poiesis, is bringing forth. It is of utmost importance that we think bringing forth in its full scope and at the same time in the sense in which the Greeks thought it. Not only handcraft manufacture, not only artistic and poetical, bringing into appearance and concrete imagery, is a bringing forth, poesis. Physics also, the arising of something from out of itself, is a bringing forth, poesis. Physics is indeed poesis in the highest sense. For what presences, by means of physics, has the bursting open belonging of bringing forth, e.g. the bursting of a blossom into bloom in itself. In contrast, what is brought forth by the artisan or the artist, e.g. the silver chalice, has the bursting open belonging to bringing forth, not in itself, but in another, in the craftsman or artist.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because already you can tell the way he's writing is in this kind of almost like oldie worldly English. Well, it's oldie worldly German. In fact, actually, a number of people I know who are German don't read Heidegger in German because he does sound so utterly fascistic that they read him in English, where the translation is not just softer, it gives a different slant on the Heideggerian mood. So, and I'll get back to any of the questions that we have around the way in which it works with fascism, but he's talking about, in this section, this notion of bringing forth. So if I grasp, again, my ingredient for what I want to deal with, and the way I grasp it, the way I have the kind of the beauty, the elegance, or whatever it is, the patterning of the grasp and bringing it toward myself. This movement allows one to begin to talk about how there is a change, a morphogenetic change, but again, I'm just throwing that word in just so you've heard it. There's a change so that there's something else happens in the grasping. Just when you're making art, for example, something happens in the bondage environments. Something happens. You know, you might have the rubber, the leather, you know, the dungeon, the handcuffs, or whatever. You know, but that's not what makes something happen. There's a poesis that's going on. And this is what he's talking. There's something that's going on. There's this other moment that happens that creates this energy. Now he uses the example. Heidegger uses the example of Plato and the cave. Do people know the story of Plato and the cave? Okay, Plato is not Plato in the cave. It's you know, a person is in the cave, and he basically Plato is a story that Plato tells. It's the story of the cave, and basically he says we're all in a cave. We're all in darkness. We all don't know. And what's important about understanding this darkness is that it's comfy. It's comfortable. One would rather be in darkness, however scary that is, than to not be in a familiar environment. You know, so the darkness, however dark it might be, however hard it might be, however complex it might be, it's more comfortable than not being in it. And one day, I mean, this story is told very many different ways, but to cut to a chase, because we're not reading it properly, but you should read the story of the cave. One of the members in the cave breaks free, is able to leave, and walks out of the cave and realizes that it's kind of amazing. There's light, there's earth, there's, you know, like whatever, it looks interesting. And not only that, he's not run over and killed, and he's like kind of amazed, and he or she, or a person goes out there looking around, decides, I'm going to go back and tell people it's not as bad as I thought. I have this knowledge. I'm going to go back and share it now with my people. He goes back, he tells them, they think he's lying, and they kill him. So Plato's cave, the story, the allegory of the cave, which is used many, many times. Sometimes the guy doesn't get killed, sometimes he does, but usually gets killed. Ever had a great idea? Ever say, look, you know, you're doing queer studies, well, not just studying it. You go to, let's say, the authorities, whoever they happen to be, your parents or people that, you know, may or may not understand, and you explain what's going on, and they don't go, oh, yeah, of course, they want to kill you. They're not necessarily interested in seeing the light. is where this comes from. Getting it, not necessarily getting it. And what Heidegger starts to show is, how is it then that somehow people began to see the light? How did that happen? If every time someone went out and they came back to tell you something and then they got killed, what happened to make that change? How did the rhythms going out and coming back in change? Was it like 3 people that went out, then maybe 20 people that went out, then 50 people? Was it just mass? How is it that it changed? That's what he's asking. Yes? Oh, Mark? You read this?
Revealing.
Right, okay, so.
Revealing a certain form of truth.
It's not yet.
Okay, sorry.
That was a rhetorical question, really. It was like,
okay.
How is it, don't answer this, just in your own minds, you know, how is it that this, how do you change your minds? How do you actually go? What causes you to act? When are you, is it when you're up against the wall and that's it? It's again the famous question of the Enlightenment. How is it that one begins to know? How is it that one asks the question, supposing it could be otherwise, what would that otherwise look like? How do you know to ask that question? What happened to make you ask that question? How come you're not just doing, I don't know what, you know, staying in the closet, or, you know, keeping on the same path, or, you know, what is it that made you turn? What was that thing? It's that thing that is the logic of Techne. And it's that thing he's saying, in some time, every time period has 1 or 2 people that go out from the cave and come back going, you know, you're not gonna believe what I just saw, and boom, they're killed. Okay? But what happens when the time period is about going out and having this relationship? How is it the time period takes on this as a way of being? That's what he's putting forward. So rather than saying, how is this possible, he's saying, whatever makes this possible, we're in this time period. We're in the time period that asks the question, supposing it could be otherwise, what would it look like? And when you ask that question, you ask it in relationship to not either or, but an exit. You've got a whole different game going on. If you figure out how to exit the cave, then what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that knowledge? Are you going to bring it back? You can tell the family? You know? I mean, I can tell you that in my family, which was a very wonderful, fabulous family, but military, you know, as most families are in the States, or their religious moment. It's like 2 different strands, but more or less the same. You know, when I used to tell them I would be doing things, they were just like, you know, horrified. Horrified. You know, it got to the point that you really couldn't explain it, because to explain it meant, you know, a war at the dinner table. And so either you'd explain it or you'd want to have peace. So what would you decide? And yet something had to happen that eventually they could hear it, they could see it. Now, I'm not just talking about my parents, but I mean, I'm just saying, you know, how is it the society progresses if it's not just by knocking down, you know, forest and making a parking lot? How is it that society actually might change, and change, let's say, for the better, just leave it as a possibility. Not just change, but change for the better. So it requires understanding that the time period we're in is a time period of technology around which there are certain ways in which he talks about this. So he talks about it in terms of this chalice, this famous silver chalice, which again, you just think the man has to get out more, you know. But what he's saying is that you have silver. Where did the silver come from? Okay, you could do a Marxist analysis. You went to the cave, there was labor, you had to get out the silver, you know, the person was exploited, the person who got the silver out, you know, was paid like nothing, it was paid in like, I don't know, cocoa beans, you know, eventually it gets to something else, you know, then that finally gets to something else, and eventually it costs, £500 to buy a little silver chalice. An event, and so that would be, labor, alienated labor, all of that is true. But that's not what's gonna change the situation by knowing that. It's not enough. So Heidegger says there's something that happens in the telling and then the not telling, and the deciding when you tell, and how you tell, where you tell, when. The only question that's not raised is the why do you tell? The why question, as I've said so many times, only leads back to God, so you just put that on the shelf. Why is the sky blue? Well, because of the light waves. Why are the light waves like that? Well, because some of them are long and some of them, why are some of them long and short? To God. Okay, so eventually all why questions lead back to God. That's not to say you should never ask a why question. Why did you do that? Why did you, beat up this child, Why did that woman kill her son? Whatever. Those why questions, they need to be asked, but the answers are not, for every answer you get, there's something behind it, and then there's something behind that one. But a what question, a how question, a when question, and a where question, that allows you to start building a discourse. And it's this discourse we're going to start thinking through. So Heidegger basically says, in the relationship between this discourse that's getting established, it's not like you're sitting down consciously thinking, now how am I going to build the discourse? God, I'm so exhausted. I got so much on my plate. I got to buy the dishes. I got to, get my food for the table. I got to cook the dinner, and I got to build a discourse. No, it's not happening that rationally. The discourse gets established in the making, in the techne of how something's grasped. So we're going to go, discourse gets established in the techne of how it's getting grasped. That techne, how far can you reach? When I say to you, grab that water, well, I can't grab it unless I move, but Arch could grab it. Sophie, you could probably grab it. It'd be harder for Grace or for George to grab it, but if they would made a dive for it, they could probably do it, right? How far can you throw your grasp? How far is out there? You want to do something with your life? You want to be ambitious? You want to go somewhere? Where are you going? Where do you throw that? Where do you throw your grasp? Where are you going to grasp? You're going to climb a mountain? You got out those hooks? You're going to throw the hook. Where are you going to throw it? Well, wherever you throw it, according to Heidegger, that sets up the there. Sorry, another noun.
Is this the mastery?
No, this is just the, no, just don't worry about mastery yet. Just the there. You throw it out. I know that I could calculate that I am about a meter away from that water. And if I wanted to grab it before Arch, I would have to figure out how to either distract him or something so that I could get it first. So I know lots of calculations of how far with that particular grasp. And so the skill that's required for me to steal that water is one thing. But if I want to get to become best artist in the world, or whatever it is you're after, best interesting way of doing something, or most bizarre scenario, where do you throw that hook? Well, wherever you throw it, out there, it's called the there, okay? Dasein. D-A-S-E-I-N, Dasein. And Dasein, the there, wherever you're throwing, you're there. And then you're going to pull it toward yourself. Come here, the there. Come to me so I can do it, so I can grasp it. That sets up what Heidegger calls enframing. E-N-F-R-A-M-I-N-G. In order to understand how a discourse operates, you need to understand that the edges of the discourse are not like yes, no, black, white, deep cut. They are caused by the there. That movement creates the edge. but it's a funny edge. It's not really an edge. It's just out there. So, in fact, what makes that out there able to be grasped is that you get the way in which the grasping requires the art form of knowing the Dasein, grabbing it. But the Dasein, the there, the famous the there, doesn't present itself going, oh, here I am, when am I going? It's like, it's not like a date waiting to be picked up. It's not like, a wallflower and it's going, where's my, dance partner? No, the Dasein also conceals itself. So there's this relationship between concealing, because maybe you don't even know what you want to grasp. Maybe you don't know what you want to be when you grow up. Maybe you never want to grow up. That's my thing. Maybe you just don't want to know. So there's that side, that's staying in the cave. Let's say, for whatever reason, you decide to go out of the cave. Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back to the cave? Do you feel that you have some reason to go back and, like in the Freudian thing, show your, parents your shit? Here's my shit. It's a wonderful gift, I give it back to you. Yeah, present. This is the Freudian people in here, that we've had that discussion last semester. You're gonna take the things you find and give them back? What do you do? So Heidegger says, actually, you're not gonna do that. You're not gonna, yeah, you might go back to the cave, but that's kind of stupid on some level, because A, you might get killed, and B, it doesn't work like that anyway. That's just a crazy myth. Not the myth of Plato necessarily, not the myth of knowledge, but the way in which knowledge operates, because knowledge is not rational. Or it's not 100% rational. It might not even be 70% rational. There's a logic to it. There's a logic to knowledge. But that knowledge, the logic involves this technique. And that knowledge that involves the technique only when we are in this famous thing called the age of technology. Questions so far? So we're going to turn to Heidegger in a minute. No, yeah.
Are there not different techniques for different ages?
Yeah, good. Yes, absolutely. And the different techniques for different ages mean that this age primarily operates on this position. So yes, there are other techniques, but they don't necessarily primarily operate that way. So they're not the age of technology. That might be the age of, whatever, slavery or something, sorry. Yeah, so does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, so we're talking about technique on different levels here, just like we're talking about technology on different levels. So you now know that technology both means your iPhone, and at the same time, it has nothing to do with your iPhone. It has to, see the other question becomes that, here's another way of putting the same problem. Here's why, for those of you, is there anybody that's a sociologist in the room?
Well, it started as one.
Okay, good, but you stopped. Okay. It's to help you otherwise. Okay, here's why I have issues with sociology. And here's where Heidegger and I are at one on this position. There was for a long time, and there still is dominant in the literature, this whole notion of spectacle. Lift a rock, find some comment about the spectacle, I don't know, 9/11 was a spectacle, or there's a writer named Guy Debord who's actually quite interesting, but he writes on the spectacle, and that things, boof, that's a spectacle, and that this world is driven by spectacle, okay? And the argument goes, why? Because we live in a mediated age. We live in a media age, not a mediated. We live in the age of television, the age of visual. The visual takes over. Then there's this thing called the gaze, G-A-Z-E, and the gaze, locks you in a certain way, and you think in a certain direction, and so on and so forth. This is a very particular logic based on the way in which one takes as a given, in this case, TV, as the predominant feature of the environment, and says the visual is the organizing principle. Well, this is where Heidegger would disagree with that. His visual is making a picture, is saying, do you get the picture? If I said to you, do you get what I'm saying? Do you have a picture of what I'm saying in your head? If I said it like that, do you get the picture? You'd understand what I meant. You don't actually have a picture in your head. You know, you're not actually saying, no, first wait, let me draw a picture. Now I'm looking at the picture, yeah, that's great. You don't look at it that way. The picture means I got it, I grasped it, I comprehended it. But it's a little bit further than comprehending. It's not just, you know, that it works somehow, that you, not only can you comprehend it, but you know how to use it, you know how to operate it. So it's this relationship. So the question, I mean, that's not to say that this isn't the age of visual culture. It is to say that there are other cultures, let's say that were the age of smell, which is not this age. This age is like practically antiseptic, you know. I mean, not that I want to bring back smoking, but I do recall the wonderful smells of cigars and different forms of cookings that were happening in open areas, but you can't have those on the streets any longer because God knows you might die of something, you know, which you probably would actually, but you know, dogs running around. That wasn't that long ago that you saw dogs running around. I mean, believe it or not, now you never see a dog not on the lead. You know, now you can only see cats running around, but even that's gonna change. You know, it's very interesting. It's a anesthetization. So there's an argument that goes, you know, there was the time period of the smell, the time period of the sight, you know, the senses basically go through that. Anyway, this notion of the spectacle is a problematic term if you take it prima facie, if you take it at face value. Yes, there are spectacles, but what makes it change the way people think? That's the question. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the way that this functions is, so there, you have
So
the
there,
replica,
design, yeah.
right? Your, see if I'm on the right track here. You have your the there. The way in which you get to the there is your phenomenology or your technique, your technique. And then your discourse is the inferred meaning of what those movements to that grasping meant. Correct?
No.
No.
But very good summary. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people think what you're saying, I think, right? You never get to the there. That's the first, you know, bad joke. You know, you might want to get to the there, but it's not a there you can ever get to, because it doesn't exist as a place. The there is the enframing. So that you're grasping, I want to be president of the United States, or I want to be, you know, a great artist, or I want to be boring artist, or whatever it is you want to be. Whatever and in fact I'm putting it as the I becomes something. In fact, it's even more complex than that, obviously. But this movement, it doesn't get smaller. It just, the creature that's dealing with design is the entity. The small, what Heidegger is going to call the small b being, and then the big B being is Dasein, and the little b being and the big B being, really you sound like a lunatic, you know, moves. So the discourse, let's call it the discourse on racism. The discourse on racism, in this case, in this example, it's not like you get to see where the edge is, it's just that you begin to realize just how wide that discourse is. Sometimes the discourse is very tiny. That's like being in an environment where there really isn't racism. I'm not sure where that is. But usually, one's in an environment where it exists. Other people might not see it. You might be sitting in a room, like you're sitting in a room, I'm sitting in a room. You might be sitting in a room, other people don't see it. They don't even know it's there. And yet, here's this discourse, like a big pumping heart. Same, you know, the whole thing, homophobia. Perfect example. You know, how does the discourse on homophobia get started? It's not so much how does it get started, that's a better way of putting it. It's that it exists. How wide does it exist? How much can you shrink that, like a tumor? And what's the growth patterns that it happens? It's not exactly like a tumor, so that's probably a bad example. Now I've got a medical person in the room. But the reason I say tumor is because it's something that grows without the edges. Well, bad example, because tumors, they still have an edge, but anyway, the point is that it doesn't really have an edge. You can't find the edge of the discourse. You can't go to the edge of racism and go, thank God, breakthrough. You know, the edge of sexism, the edge of homophobia, the edge of whatever is the stupid edge that you have to deal with. You can't, because as we understood, I hope, from last week, I realize it's not very long ago, that the universe is as big as it is. The universe is the is. You don't get out of the is. Creepy.
Isn't that somewhat of a misnomer though, because people who exist within that system, like say like the edge of racism, the edge of homophobia, wouldn't it be the people who can recognize that because of that edge, because they're situated somewhere on that resistance point of the edge?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The reason I say yes and no, obviously, how do people get out of the cave? The cave is the discourse. How do you really get out of that cave if there's no edge to the cave? So, on the one hand, you can swim around, think you're getting out of it, but you still find yourself right back in the middle of it, or some part of it. You can't get it off of you. Okay, so that's the first problem. Second problem is, let's say you do manage to get out of the discourse, however you can. Let's say, I don't know, you do some sort of trans thing that happens, like transubstantiation or some really interesting thing. The question then becomes, you know, well, no, you can't do that. I mean, let me put it like this. As Foucault would explain discourse later on, which we'll see next week, he gets into this comment that discourse is like air. You can't get out of air. You can get out of air, then you're going to die. Or you can have a mask on and, you know, oxygen. So you can get out of the air and go into space or whatever. By the way, anybody seen Gravity? That was a terrible film. I just could not believe it. I was so annoyed. Thank God I saw it in 3D. I would have just died. You know, it was just like, you know, it was like no plot. There was, what's his name, George Clooney, who was like Mr. Happy Man. I don't care, I'm dying, whatever. You know, and it was, anyway, sorry. But they had the mask. That's what made me think this. Okay, so think about it again. In the case of dialectical reasoning, one never is in the present, ever. The moment you're present, it goes somewhere else. It's always a mediation. And now, a different move is happening. Here one's saying one's always in the present. One is never in the future or in the past. Makes time travel very interesting, actually.
Is the area of Dasein the area enclosed by natures of
Dasein and little b being.
Yeah.
So Dasein isn't the whole area. Yeah.
No, but there is an area there because it's got edges, hasn't it? So it must. So what I'm asking is,
It doesn't really have edges as you're thinking.
Yeah, but does it exist in any sense? Is it conceptual? So does it exist in a temporal way but not a spatial way, or is there any sense in which it exists spatially?
Yes.
Right.
So think of a cloud. Okay, what are the edges of a cloud? Think of the Earth. What's the edge of the Earth? You could say it's the atmosphere. You could say it's like, I don't know, the ozone level. You know, where's the edge really? We can talk like that. We can talk, you know, I'm going to the edge of the world. You know, but there's no edge. Not in the sense that you can go off of the edge in the same way as this kind of solid line that you have to break through. This is like more gaseous, if you want to use this kind of more permeable. The edge happens because of the core that shoots out as far as it goes. So whatever shoots out as far as it goes, that's the edge. And the edge.
But it's not a spatial edge then, in any sense.
No, it is, like dimensionally.
It has a dimension.
It can have 0 dimension, but it does have a dimension.
So
I'm
this
sorry.
is the same thing as like Judith Butler in the sense that like the second you escape any sort of, the second that you get to that point of resistance that here's the edge of this, it's reinterpreted into the larger discourse, which...
Yeah, which you keep getting swallowed up in.
Right.
This is not to get you depressed. okay, or to say there's no such thing as resistance. It's exactly the reverse. It's to say be wise in your resistance. Because change has happened. Not every time period, as I started at the outset, is an age of technology. Well, how'd that happen? But it was like some sort of Godzilla meets Bambi, Bambi meets Godzilla moment, you know, where, you know, suddenly it's like boom, new moment because Godzilla came and stepped on the poor little Bambi, and then you have a change. Is it like, you know, sunset one goes down, then goes up, that's it, new act? No. So how does it change? How does change actually happen? How does it transform? How does the Plato cave thing work when there's no edge? And you really can't get out of it. Because we do get out of it somehow. Except we don't get out of it in the way that it sounds like one gets out of it. Mark, what were you going to say?
I don't know.
You had this kind of, I'm going to say something.
Oh, I did, yeah. When you're talking about this edge, is it, I mean, I think Heidegger uses the word, I'm not sure if I'm right or not, I shouldn't ask the question I like. Is it in itself? The idea of it's in itself?
Well, you have to be careful with that expression because
Yeah.
it could call up dialectical expression.
Yeah, but I'm more on the lines if going to the sort of work is withdrawn, the kind of the edges are withdrawn.
It's the concealment, isn't it? He talks about concealment in the framing.
Yes.
That
And
there's
can you
something,
develop that?
well, that there's that within the framing there's something hidden and concealed that you don't even know that's within the grasping.
Yes. And what is that hidden, concealed thing?
It's part of the telos almost. It's sort of like the ground. It's like groundless ground. It's a bit like that.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. That's going to really upset people at the moment. Let's not go there for the minute because Sophie's sitting in on the PhD lectures, and so she knows this sort of ground thing that's going on. But I don't care.
No, he mentions the ground. He talks about
Yeah, I
the
know.
ground.
Sorry, come on, step in. Okay, let's look at it this way. Yeah, no, there's a ground. What is the is? What does it mean to be here? Ready to do hand modeling now. Yeah, that's right. Now, what does it mean to deal with the is? What is this is? What does it mean to be present? The thing about Foucault that I always loved about Foucault, to show my bias, sorry, is that he very much believed in resistance. He was a very political animal. And he was angry about a lot of the work that was happening because there was always this argument that you could not be in the present, that you could never reach the present. If you can't be in the present, how can you change things? How can you be politically active to change things, or any active? How do you deal with it? So part of the argument that he talks about, that he raises, that you'll get into with more vigor next week, is around the way in which one understands now as a temporal thing, but also as a here, as a spatial thing. So here and now is, let's say, the guts of the discourse, and the edges are formed by the Dasein and the little b being. But think of yourself now as though you are swimming in the ocean. And so picture an ocean. How many people's ocean is wild? No one's going to take the risk. Okay. George, you surf, right? Okay.
I was going to say my ocean's wild.
Your ocean's wild. And what does it look like? So you go into the ocean. You go in with your board, or what do you do?
It's controlled wildness.
It's controlled wildness.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are you on the shore?
I'm not on the shore. I'm further out.
You're further out.
Where
Okay.
the waves are breaking.
Okay. Where the waves are. Okay. But you had to start inward, right? Or did you go by boat?
No, you've got to get through the wild to get to the place.
Okay, so explain exactly what happens. You're on, you put on your wetsuit, and now what happens?
Put on your wetsuit, and then you have the
He's
task.
president of the Surfing Society of somewhere.
Liverpool 2007.
Okay, go on.
Got the CV. And then you have to fight to get to the place.
Wait, you have an outfit on,
How much detail do you want?
not that much detail. No, but you have like a surfboard or something, right?
You have a surfboard.
And you have something attached to your foot.
You do. You have a leash around your foot that's attached to the board, which you velcro onto your foot.
Thank you.
You zip your wetsuit up.
Okay, yes.
You
And
do-
now what happens?
Then you have to paddle your way.
So you run in.
Paddle like
Yeah, I mean, there's methods and methods, but
Yes. Techne. Yes, go on.
Techne. And then, so you paddle your way out, you walk your way out to start with, and you start fighting your way through these huge waves that are coming towards you.
Uh-huh.
And then you have to start swimming, and then you have to start, if you're on a beach break, then you have to paddle for a long time, and you have to duck dive to get underneath the waves to be able to get to the point where you need to be.
And how do you know where you need to be?
Because you see other people in that position. and-
Drowning.
No, you're the one who's drowning, and they're the ones
That's
who are
right.
in the air.
No, but if nobody else is in that position, how do you know how far to go?
Because, well, you have to wait till the wave is giving you a bit of context about where you have to be.
Okay, and what is the wave doing? Hi, George. Try and ride me now. You know, what is the wave doing? What's the wave? How does the wave speak to you? How do you understand what it's doing? How do you know how far to go before
Intuition.
you get on that surfboard and ride your way back?
You have to intuitively know. It's not something or it's something that you learn how to know because you're reading what's going on.
Okay, so what are you reading that's going on? The color of the wave, the velocity of it, what?
The shape of the wave, the way it's coming in, the angle it's coming in, the way it's working with the wind, and how it's feathering and how it's particularly going to break in accordance with the banks.
And so then you know at some point at that feathering moment you can then.
You get to a point where you know this is my point of takeoff. If I'm too far in, then it's going to eat me after it breaks. If I'm too far out, then I'm not going to catch it because I'm off the back of it. So you kind of work with all those elements to get to a point where like this is my point, this is my moment.
Okay, now picture the wave that you're riding as the edge of the Dasein, as edge of the discourse, and when you're riding it all the way in, and when you ride it in, you don't come like here's the shore. Let's say here's the shore, and here's the wave. When you ride your wave, let's say you start here, you come back over here, right? It's very rare that you come back to the same point you started at. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the sake of this, yeah. It's rare.
Okay, the point is that this bit, from here to here, is your discourse. And your discourse is as far as it makes sense for you to read it on some level, not rationally. You were right to say that. There is a whole scientific explanation. You could figure out the whole different feathering. You could sit there studying it, but you'd never know. You'd have to go out and experience and have a sense of how to do this and come back, and then you end up wherever you end up. And if there's an undertow, and you get caught in the undertow, how do you get out of it?
You swim, or you just relax and let it take you. That's generally the accepted manner.
And once it takes you somewhere else, how do you get back to shore? Call for help. Send up a flare.
Call for help, send up a paddle back, you know.
But when you paddle
But
back,
again, that's intuition to know, or intuition, and that's learned science as well. That you know to know. Because if you're going to paddle straight, directly against that, then you're going to get tired and you're going to drown.
okay, now picture Dasein as a big wave, and you're going toward that wave. It's not a wave that's just sitting there going, I'm waiting for you, babe, come here, take you on. It's not like you're going to be in some sort of fight. But you know at some point that Dasein wave thing is going to rise up. And you're coming toward it, but the Dasein could get you and drag you away. Your discourse will fail. Likewise, you could sort of jump on this and not work. It doesn't hold. The kind of Dasein that, it might be a weak way of explaining this, but the kind of Dasein or the kind of discourse environment that's being set up here is set up so that distance, you never meet the Dasein head on, or you get swallowed up into it, sucked in. And the Dasein never meets you. So there is always a bit of, let's say, reverse magnetism going on. So there's this distance. Now, that still forms edges. It's just not an edge. It's a spatial, I'm trying to give you a spatial example. I'm not sure if this worked, because it's not wholly accurate to the argument, but it's accurate enough that you can get a sense of visually how to understand how a discourse operates. So you're walking into a store to buy something, and you realize that you're being harassed somehow. Somehow somebody is making fun of you. Now, if you are female, let's use that example, we haven't used that one yet. If you walk into a store as a female person, and someone starts, whistling and, sort of making faces and playing with themselves, how do you know what's going on? I'm sure that particularly every female has been in this situation. Conceivably, everybody's been in this scenario where you're being made fun of. You're being made into what Lyotard, Lyotard, Lyotard calls a differend. A differend is when you're silenced at the moment of action. You can't say anything, and you're stuck. You're stuck in this moment. Now, this differend is operating because there's a discourse that maybe the store clerk can't see at all. But you know it's there, and they know it's there, and they're operating in this discourse. And that's what he's talking about at a much wider level called technology. Does that make sense so far?
So with the way that changes, the way to sort of combat that, isn't it sort of like the idea of the panopticon, with like the guards all looking in and looking out, and as people sort of turn around, the behaviors change, but it doesn't mean that you escape the panopticon itself. It's just what the guards are actually doing changes.
One, way to think about this is right now, I not to sound too depressed about things, but I do think that there is a bit of a shift in the way in which the world is operating. I call it the making of the upper global classes, but anyway. It's very quiet how it's happened. And it's happened very rapidly in the last 5, maybe 10 years max, where there has been a shift so that one now sees a very different terrain around how people can see each other, hear each other, talk to each other, so that when you talk to, let's say, people that are in a better situation, they don't think there's a recession on. They don't have a problem. They don't understand what the issues are. In fact, in case you didn't notice, the economy is recovering, which is great. Great news.
It's recovering for that 1%.
Yeah. I saw a very interesting statistic, which was that if you take 85 of the richest people, do you see this? This was in the Metro thing. 85 of the richest people in the world, and put them in a bus, their combined income would equal 3 billion people's income on the earth. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this like this is that how did that change? That wasn't always like that. Or maybe there was just a little opening for the last 50 years that's now closing. It changed. There is a change now. Now, that's what you need to take away from this talk. How does something change when you're in the present? Think about it. How does that Techne operate? That's the key aspect of this. How did, like the women's movement, the gay movement, the civil rights movement, how did that actually work in order that things changed? And they could spring back very quickly. In fact, actually in the States right now, there's a bill in front of, every day I read more insanity in the House of Representatives and whatever. There's this new bill where women who are raped have have they have to sign some sort of weird paper. I forgot now what it was so insane. I've forgotten the details of this. That's how crazy it was. I was like so infuriated I couldn't even like get through it. Has anybody read about this? It's some sort of horrible scenario. They have to declare. I think they have to declare.
It's called the rape insurance.
That's it. The rape insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what it was. It's like women have to. Sorry.
I don't remember what it is either. I just remember thinking, this is just incredible. How much worse? Don't ever tempt worse, because it will get worse. You know. So anyway, again, how does something change? What is really happening? How do we go from point A to B? So, are we ready now to actually look at Heidegger? How many people have the Heidegger moment with them? Oh, good. Let's say I've got my Heidegger hiding. Because I want you to take a look at the very first line.
Yeah, sure.
Giving it away. It's a green book. I didn't bring my thing out.
So I just want to switch now.
Okay, it's missing my head. Great. Okay. If you turn to the very first, very first page. Well, not very first, the page of his question, which is page. I'm just going to read you this little. Actually, maybe somebody else reads. Lost Mark is gone for a second. Andre, you want to read the very first? Just this very first, because I want you to get a sense of how he's, after this lecture, how we're trying to talk about this thing called the relation between Techne as the essence of humanity. Go on.
The question concerning,
just the first paragraph.
The question concerning technology. In what follows, we shall be questioning concerning technology. Questioning builds a way. We would be advised, therefore, above all, to pay heed to the way, and not to fix our attention on its isolated sentences and topics. The way is the way of thinking, all the ways of thinking, more or less perceptibly, led through language in a manner that is extraordinary. We shall be questioning concerning technology, and in so doing, we should like to prepare a free relationship to it. The relationship will be free if it opens our human existence to the essence of technology. When technological issues here.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
When we can respond to this essence, we shall be able to experience the technological within its own bounds.
Okay, so he then thank you. Questions on that? Anybody have a problem with the grammar? We shall be questioning concerning technology. You notice the two gerunds put together. We shall be a gerund is an ing. It's a form of a word that gets an ing put on the end of it. That's a gerund, G-E-R-R-A-N-D. And a gerund is an action verb. Questioning, swimming, walking, talking, inging. And the inging of something is very similar to the ish. Bluish, reddish, so on. So the ish on a noun makes it have no edges.
So they are the continuous tense.
Yes. But it's an active continuous tense. So the ish that's stuck on a noun, like I said, bluish, mannish, girlish, the ish, allows one to break a boundary whilst retaining a boundary. And just like a gerund, allows one to talk about process while still having core to the process. So you're questioning and you're also concerning. this thing called technology. And then he goes on to say that it's a matter of thinking. It's a matter of a type of thinking, different ways of thinking. And he spends the next 4 or 5 pages explaining what is meant by thinking. And the one thing that thinking is for Heidegger, or the one thing that thinking is not for Heidegger, is sitting there going, it's not contemplation in that way. What you guys are doing, or what we're all doing in terms of one's art practices, that's thinking. It's this active concerning. It's this active way of grasping. It's the active grasp. And not only that, it's the grasp of the wave and then bringing it with you all the way back to shore. It's the act of grasping. That's called thinking. And he's making the argument that in the age called technology, this active grasp of thinking that you then bring toward yourself creates the material to produce a going forth. In the grasp that you bring this wave towards you and ride it all the way back, in that movement, that's what he calls thinking. That is also what you might call art, making art. In this grasp that you ride all the way back to shore, in doing that, it creates a material reality, as real as though it were the tabletop. A racist or homophobic or happy discourse, the family discourse, it doesn't matter what the discourse is, I'm using the hardcore ones just to make sure you're hearing me. These create a bringing forth. They create a way of acting in that discourse. It's not that they create a reaction. They create the next part of the story. When you have materials that you're grasping and then you're making your artwork, you're bringing it forth, as it were. This bringing forth creates another part of the discourse. It makes it bigger. So he wants you to see the way, he says here, we would be advised, therefore, above all, to pay heed to the way and not to fix our attention on isolated sentences and topics. Get into the notion of the way, the process. How do you really do your artwork? What do you grasp? What do you think? How does dirt and grime and things that don't seem to be important, how does that matter? How does that create the matter? How does that create the material of the discourse that you're in? That's what he's talking about here. We would be advised, well advised, therefore, above all, to pay heed to the way and not to fix our attention on isolated sentences and topics. This way that he's talking about, the way is a way of thinking. I could have, or he could have written here, I could have said, the way is a way of art. It's how, it's the how. Thinking is a how process. It's not a why process. This is the key here. Ooh. Hello. we're well within our time. Yeah. Okay. It's been a weird, and you guys didn't have a break. Did you need a break? Good.
Yeah, okay.
Too late. Are you okay? We're almost done. We have about. What's that? You quit smoking? Well done. Good.
Way to make me the odd one out.
Yeah, that's right. That's the right answer. Okay. So, on the next page, page 4, he goes on to say, in the ancient way, or in the usual way of understanding technology, according to ancient doctrine, i.e. the 1960s, the essence of a thing is considered to be what the thing is. We ask the question concerning technology when we ask what it is, how it is, One says technology is a means to an end. The other says technology is a human activity. The two definitions of technology belong together, but it basically doesn't do anything. He's talking about this techne that's going on. Now, you guys can read the this scenario, this whole question concerning technology, hopefully thoroughly. But if you turn to page 10 now, you will get into the question of this thing called the bringing forth. Think about the bringing forth as your work of art. Think about the thing that starts to appear is the bringing forth. Page 10?
It's not the same on this.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So find poesis. Find footnote 9.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is what Mark read, right? This is, I think, your section. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, it is of utmost importance that we think bringing forth in its full scope and at the same time in the sense in which the Greeks thought it. Not only handicraft, okay, skip. Okay, appearance in concrete imagery is a bringing forth, it's a poesis. Physis, also, the rising of something from out of itself, is a bringing forth, a poesis. So, this next piece of the puzzle is basically suggesting to you, I hope you're seeing this, I'm trying to get you to think about it in terms of what you literally do when you're doing something that is part of your art. When you start to work on a project, when you start to devise the project, you don't know where it's going to end. You just throw your hook out. Or do you know where it's going to end? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Okay. So,
It changes.
yeah, it does. So, and as it's changing, this way of then grasping and bringing it towards yourself, and then at the same time, if you bring it too close to yourself, you have nothing. It becomes either too literal, it collapses. So he's saying the technique, what you need to learn as artists, I mean, he's not quite saying it like this, but I'm saying it like this. What one needs to learn as an artist is how to do this grasp. Because if you don't know, it's like it's all on the wrist. If you don't know how to do the grasp, it's not going to work. The piece of work is not going to work. It's going to be flat. It's going to fall apart. It's not going to work as a work of art. So he's talking about this way in which you need to understand this relationship between the grasp, the pulling together, and the way in which it brings forth something, which is not a telos, although this motion might feel like a telos. It's in fact engaging with a discourse. Now, I want to just throw out, just pocket that as much as possible. There's two other things you need to know about this, and then I want to just raise, I'm sorry about this, that was so, we had to start so late, but there's two other features you need to know. One is this in framing. So your task is to think about how something ends up creating a field of some kind with no edges. Think about how that works. Think about if you have to think of a song, where does it end? You know, where's that sort of energy going, and it just goes away. This is, by the way, why a lot of times people refer to discourse analysis as acoustic philosophy, because it has no edge. My singing. Are there edges here? Yes, there are. If there weren't edges, you wouldn't be able to make sense of this. I mean, it's not Morse code. It's not actually tapping out a message to you. It's not making sense in that sense, but you know. So for every hit, Or maybe in between each hit is the edge. Where's the edge? Is the edge the hit, or is it in between the hit?
In between.
Yes is the answer. Yes, it's the hit, and it's between the hit. And if you think about it like this, then the discourse is not only between the two hits, that airspace, but the whole thing. So the whole thing is the amount of tapping I'm doing. That's the discourse, but also there's like minor moments happening within the discourse. That also, they're not little discourses, they're just other parts of that discourse. And that creates end framing. Now, just like the word sounds, frame, it's an ongoing, moving way in which an open edge is created. You do it all the time. All of your work, unless you're doing illustration, all of it is creating this open boundary. You just need to know how to grasp it. So that's the first thing. The second thing you need to know is this famous word he uses, this famous phrase called standing reserve. It's a wonderful phrase. Now, you got this bit? Now, let's say I wanted to amplify, I wanted to make this sound different. What would I do to make it sound different?
Do it differently.
Did anybody else want to suggest something? I'm not doing it for rhythm. I've got this one going. Somebody shout.
Amplify it.
I want to hear shout. Scream.
Ah!
Thank you. Okay. Try again.
Ah!
You want to try another one?
Oh, come on. Was I the only one?
Hey, honestly.
Like, I mean,
Come on.
Well, Phil just did the sound. That wasn't interruption.
What was? Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, is that it? That's the sounds? We got those two sounds that I had to force out of you? Anyway, all right. I'm exhausted now, my arm's gonna fall off. Okay. Whatever lies to hand that can be grasped is part of the standing reserve. The scream, the burp, or whatever that was. There in the throat. Standing reserve. But what makes it really a standing reserve is that there's power to not use it. And so you keep that group in reserve. They're frozen until you grasp it. So the standing reserve, in the Marxist scenario, labor is often understood as, quote, a standing reserve. So, you know, you can have really low wages because there's like, you know, a zillion people that can take your job. So you have to put up with a terrible job with low wages because if you give it up, there'll be like 20 other people clawing over you to get it. They're standing in reserve. They're the standing reserve. Well, what does it mean for art to have a standing reserve? Think about it. You're grasping, pulling something to you. What's your standing reserve? I just made up a fake song here, you know.
It's not the same as a secret, is it?
It could be a secret. You could have a secret. That could be standing in reserve, but in fact, maybe what's standing in reserve, like for example, in Sophie's work, one of the things that stands in reserve is all the little metal pieces you have lying around. You know, it's just they're there. They're part of the there. Think about how a standing reserve operates. Think about how your work operates. What are you going to grasp? What's ever standing close to hand? That's the arbitrary form of standing reserve, but he's talking about a much more, let's say, required standing reserve. How do you know which one to pick? Okay, if your work is like, I don't really care which one I'm picking, I'm just picking. Okay, that's not the standing reserve he's talking about. If you know, because you have a sense, a skill of which one to pick, that's your standing reserve.
so within this discourse, with other pieces of discourse that are part of the discourse,
Right.
standing reserve then functions in two ways, in the sense that here you have this operation, standing reserve, like, for somebody like me who does not consider myself a very technically skilled artist,
Right.
you have the standing reserve of this is the canon of how you paint, how you do things.
Right.
Which is the discourse of that
Right,
thing.
okay.
And then my own standing reserve is the ideas of how I'm doing these things.
Right, excellent. And they create an enframing. So the standing reserve is actually very useful to create boundaries. It's a complex one. We'll come back to this. Do not worry that you're just hearing it for the first time, so it's tough. Also, you need to read this before class.
Is there a problem with relying on that though, because it's sort of like name cave or no?
There is a problem with relying on it. Yes, you're very astute, actually. Yes. I'm just gonna leave it there. But yes, there's a problem. There's a problem in reality, you know.
Can framing be created by somebody else who's outside, maybe from viewpoint?
Yes. Yes. How does your artwork enframe itself so that it requires one reading and not another? So there's not like 50 million ways you could read your piece. There's like one or two max, you know, without it being told what it's saying. How does it create this moment where the piece of artwork actually does the grasping?
Does that not make it dialectical?
Why would it make it dialectical?
If there's only this one way of reading it.
No, don't. It's a singularity, yes. Can you expand on that singularity thing?
I can't remember what you said.
But that was good.
It only has one side. It's only one way of looking at it. There isn't a not side or a not aspect to it. Whatever you're looking at, it is. Okay.
But that's good. That's good enough for the time being. Although it's not really about just the looking. It's a singularity is a dimension. So don't forget that part.
Okay.
Just remember. It's not going to make sense at the moment. Just put it in your head and think dimension, singularity.
Okay.
Has anybody ever seen a Klein bottle? Does anybody know what a Klein bottle is? Has anybody ever studied topology? No. Anyway, okay. Klein bottle. K-L-E-I-N. Klein bottle. Klein bottle is a one-dimensional bottle. It's so fabulous. And they actually can make it, you can make it in real life. Anyway, just take a look at it. That last thing I want to leave you with before, you know, we disband in fear and agony, is this ability to grasp out there has another name. Especially if it's arbitrarily grasped. So the standing reserve has a much more specific way of going. There's a very particular way of going forward. Deleuze and Guattari, in 1,000 Plateaus, their first chapter, get into this question called, or get into this comment called the rhizome. R-H-I-Z-O-M-E, the rhizome. The rhizome comes from plants. It comes from plants that don't have roots. So they proliferate by going on a surface. Grass is like the usual one, but it doesn't have to be just or they have like they're like a bulb of some kind. Ginger. That's a rhizome. You know, I don't know what I don't cook and I don't eat and I don't do these things. So I don't know whatever grow things, but yeah, the ginger is one. You know, those things that look like roots. I mean, they grow on the surface. Irises are rhizomes. I mean, there's tons of rhizomes around. Okay, these rhizomes, they have no roots, so there's not a dialectical. This is why they stole this idea. There's not what they call arboreal philosophy, the philosophy of the tree with the roots and the branches and this and that. There's just the surface. There's just the discourse. And this discourse pops. This discourse, in order for, it's like a bubbling thing, like how thick is your discourse? How thick is your surface? Does the surface have a thickness? If it does have a thickness, how can it be a surface? And on it goes, you know, you can just gnaw off a leg with this kind of thing. Okay, but what they're saying is that the rhizome, which has several principles, we don't have enough time to go into them right now, the rhizome just spores. And wherever it lands, it lands. And it only goes along a surface. Now, I don't want you to do too much with this at the moment because you're too tired to do with anything with it anyway. But what you need to think about for next week is this relationship between the rhizome and the standing reserve. And think about it via your own artwork. Mark, can you say something? Oh, okay. Think about it via your own artwork, and you will begin to crack this. I mean, next week, like I said, Mattia will get into these questions of the different principles of the rhizome and how it operates and so on. But I just wanted to set it up so you can see, and then he'll move that, hopefully, he'll move that into the why am I so wise. If this gets too fast, the course, do something. Nod, scream, always useful. Well, ours was the only one that screamed, so honestly, and that was under, scream. So, yeah, scream, but also do the reading before you come here, because it'll help immensely.
But sometimes reading doesn't help. I saw so many different things. Obviously, I read it all the way around.
You didn't read it wrong way around, but next time say something. Just interrupt. But that's good. Okay. Next week.
How do we go to page 5?
Oh, yeah, I'm sending it to you. Oh, no, wait, hold on. I think I've got page. No, I lie. I think I've got page 5 here. No, I don't have page 5 here.
It was the one that was causing you some.
Yes. Hold on. I think, just wait a second.
But if you put it on the Dropbox, we might be able to...
Hey, there's an idea. That's what I'll do.
How do I get up to the school?
I'm going to do it right now. Try. I was thinking